now. Perfect. My name is Jakiyah Bradley, and I'm a very soon graduating senior in the Gallatin School of Individualized Study and the current chairperson of student government. On behalf of the NYU Alumni Association and the Office of Global Inclusion, Diversity, and Strategic Innovation, I want to thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, 5 Questions with Dr. Lisa Coleman. Now, before we begin, please know that all of us at NYU hope that you and your family are safe and well during these unprecedented times. In light of the current global crisis, we've moved our programming online, and we're so thankful that you've chosen to join us and to continue learning with the collective knowledge of the NYU community. Representing nearly 600,000 alumni around the world, your NYU Alumni Association offers connections and continued education for life with weekly events just like this one. So make sure to check out the NYU Alumni website and social media platforms to keep up to date with all of the events and programs. And today we're so delighted to introduce Dr. Lisa Coleman, NYU's inaugural Senior Vice President for Global Inclusion and Strategic Innovation and the university's Chief Diversity Officer. Today's session will be interpreted by Jessica Ames and Rebecca Friedman Lockhart. So thank you both for assisting us today. And you can also enable closed captioning at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions during the session, feel free to enter them in the question answer box on your Zoom screen, and we'll get to as many questions as we can at the conclusion of our program, which will last about 30 minutes or so. So thank you again for joining us, and you know what, let's just jump right into it. So hi, Dr. Coleman, how are you doing?
I'm well, how are you? It's good to see you.
Yes, good to see you as well. Are you doing okay?
I'm doing just fine, and I want to echo your sentiments. I hope everyone out there is just taking good care of their family and loved ones and sheltering in place. And I want to give a big shout out. You know, we just did that at 7 o'clock to all the people working in the front lines and healthcare workers, all those people working behind the scenes as well. And thank you to Jessica and Rebecca for the interpreting.
Yes, so amazing. All right, so let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about yourself. So you joined NYU in 2017, which is like my sophomore year, and you were NYU's inaugural Senior Vice President for Global Inclusion and Strategic Innovation and Chief Diversity Officer. But you're also an alum because you earned your PhD from NYU. So you have a lot of hats, a lot of NYU hats. How has your perspective changed from being a student to now being an administrator?
Well, it's changed dramatically, Jakiyah. Before I get started, let me do a couple shout outs to you. You have been a tremendous student leader, and it has been a pleasure to work with you. Yes, you're right, I came in during your sophomore year, and then this year it's been tremendous. And you've shown such tremendous leadership, not just during the year, but during this time, during the pandemic. So thank you. You know, the town hall that you all put together, all of the things that you've been doing. And I know you've been talking to lots of students and lots of our NYU community members, including our alums. So thank you. For those of you who don't know, Jakiyah is a Fulbright recipient. You know, one of our superstars, of course, as she's already mentioned, will graduate tomorrow. So congratulations. And then will join us as an alum. So she will be part of this community in just a couple of days. So I hope that everyone will also take a time to log on to the virtual grad alley as well and enjoy the celebration with our students. So how have things changed since I was a student? Well, besides the fact that my hair is really gray and I have to cover it a lot, besides that, my perspective has changed a great deal. Being a student, and certainly being a graduate student, you know, I was very focused on my studies. I was very focused on my department. I had the luxury of taking classes across different schools. I was able to take some classes in Tisch and the law school, and I, you know, ventured over to the business school. And that's one of the great things about NYU is there's so many different schools. And as a graduate student, one of the reasons I chose NYU was because it would allow me to do that kind of interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary work. But like I said, I was still a student. I was very focused on being a student and doing that. I did some student leadership as a graduate student. But coming back has just been tremendous. The focus on the, I was at NYU in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so we were just about to enter into this global enterprise that we were going to undertake. And so I got to read about it from afar, but to come back and actually experience it has been tremendously, and especially, and I say this, the field of diversity and inclusion, as you sort of announced, this is actually my third startup gig. And so the field of diversity and inclusion has changed over time. And so I liken that to how universities have changed, right? Universities have changed. We've become more global. Universities have become more diverse in a lot of ways, not just in terms of, gender or race or religion, but in terms of things like neurodiversity, right? And people along the disability spectrums. And so, and the other thing is, NYU is a very innovative institution, and I was very glad to come back and to be able to engage in, things like we've opened a makerspace in Brooklyn, and there's the Tandon School of Engineering that wasn't here when I was here. So they're all new kinds of opportunities and possibilities, and that's what we've been exploring in this space of diversity, inclusion, and innovation since I've gotten back.
Yes. So I know we just talked about all of your studies yesterday, but I think that people might want to hear this. So I know you've taken a lot of classes, as you just mentioned, across the different schools. If you had to pick like one super cool class that you could talk about for hours, what would it be?
Oh, yes. I actually took a class when I was there, and it was, I don't want to say which school because I don't remember how it was cross-listed. It was cross-listed across schools, but the professor had us go out into the field, and we had to do, we went to places like grocery stores. It actually taught me something about teaching. I actually incorporated it into my teaching later, but we went out and we had to visit places that we didn't go. So I lived in Brooklyn at the time. So for me, the day trip was to Harlem because it was so far. So I went up there and went to all kinds of, and it was to go to different kinds of stores that you had never really gone to. And so I did that, and it was one of my favorite experiences. And then we also had to go to, I'm gonna say clubs, like museums that we wouldn't necessarily always take part in. And it was a really eye-opening experience. And then we had to ask questions and meet with people who were curators or worked in the stores, et cetera. And so I just learned a lot. And because I wasn't a person who did field work in that sense, I was a real classic book study at home person. So I found that really exciting and really fun, and a really good way to sort of break up the learning and engage in some practical application.
I love that. Any excuse to get out the house off campus, like.
Exactly.
I wish I had a class like that.
I know you're wrapping things up now, so I can imagine you're quite busy with the books, right?
Yep. But back to you, because I know this 5 questions about you. Next question is thinking about your role now. So what are some current challenges with strategic innovation, and also what are some opportunities that NYU faces regarding diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging?
Well, of course, we're seeing during this COVID-19 pandemic that disparities have been, sort of both re-exposed because we're aware of some of those disparities, but we're also now aware of the differential impact that something like a pandemic can have on various communities. And I'll give you one example. We've noticed, and this of course came out in various publications related to higher education, that women's research publications are down. Well, for those of us who work in this field, that's not surprising because we know that when we return home, there are things, and especially if, schools are canceled, camp is canceled, all of those things, many of us who are parents, we have to then turn to those duties as well. And that takes up, so we Zoom all day or do our meetings and, do our reading or whatever. And then there's the caretaking. And so whether that's elderly parents or I've said, our new colleagues are our pets, our children, our mothers, our parents, et cetera. And so, and while they're great people, we didn't know they were going to be our colleagues. And so, right. And so that's presented some challenges in terms of home space and then the balance, what we used to talk about, work-life balance, right? So I think there are opportunities. One of the things that we're doing is we're offering writing seminars, right? To have people be able to take the time out during their day instead of just Zooming in meetings to gather to think about writing opportunities, publication opportunities together, right? So that people can publish together. So the lift isn't as great if you're just publishing a single authored publication. So we have a lot of work in that faculty space, right? Thinking about how we support our faculty with grants. And as you know, a lot of grants, and particularly from NSF or NIH or the various philanthropic foundations, focus a lot on diversity and inclusion. So how do we help people get those grants and support those? How do we leverage the entrepreneurship? You know, one of the reasons I came to NYU is that, and sorry, I hinted at this before, it's just an incredibly innovative and entrepreneurial institution. I mean, that's part of the reason it looks so different than it did, you know, when I was here early in the 2000s. And so then how do we marry that with what we know is good diversity and inclusion? And if you look at, you know, most of the major companies, whether it's Google or PwC or whoever it is, you know, they're talking a lot about diversity and inclusion. And part of that is they've realized, like the work that's out of Scott Page, that diversity and inclusion and innovation, right? One equals the other, and to get one, you need the other because you need those points of contestation. And then I would say the last thing is, you know, I referenced this before, but when people think about diversity, often, you know, they're thinking about race and gender and age and ability, but I also think about diversity in terms of diversity of thought and diversity of disciplines. And so as I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking about how do we engage the people, right, across these different backgrounds and characteristics, but also how do we engage these disciplines in meaningful ways? And so the idea of something like 370J, where we're bringing together our arts with our business, with our Steinhardt School of Education, with the School of Engineering, and then we're putting that together with all these young people, women and men from all these different backgrounds and countries, and they're coming up with, you know, they do things like hackathons and solve problems I've never imagined, right? And so I just think that is that we at NYU, and I think, you know, I don't want to brag a little too much in advance, but I think we'll be a leader in this space. We are positioned to be, and I think we will continue to be. And I'm seeing that when corporations and others reach out to us, as well as, right, the students who want to enroll. So.
Definitely. I mean, I think you can brag about that. I never got to go to 370J because of COVID. I was looking at the website and I was like, oh my gosh, they have everything. Everything. So when we're thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, going back to COVID, what has the impact of COVID been in these discipline areas, specifically thinking about distance learning, thinking about scholarship, research, and the diverse communities that you just talked about?
Well, I think it presents opportunities again. So one of the articles I just actually published in Diverse Issues in Higher Education was about multi-generational learning. And one of the things that I say in higher education is we are one of the only industries often that has people, and you know this, Jakiyah, people who are 80 because they're still teaching. I will be one of those people. You know, I might be 100, who knows, especially if I can keep my hair, you know. And then, and seriously though, and then we have people who often, you know, will enroll at 15 and 16 years old, right? Because we have those geniuses. So the range of who's at our institution is quite large, and that presents all kinds of opportunities for cross learning, right? Cross learning across these generations. When people are talking about the generations in the workforce and the trouble, and I'm like, well, in higher education, we can figure this out. You know, we have lots of people who are older mentoring younger people. We have reverse mentoring, younger people mentoring older people. And in this digital age, this is a real opportunity, I think, to, as we say, double down on that, because a lot of people who have entered into this space, particularly if you were a faculty member like myself, who was teaching, you know, I wasn't taught to teach everything online. And so I've learned a lot from some of the people like, you know, people like you, people who've been like, no, Lisa, turn it on this way. Like, oh, okay. You know, different filters, all these different things. So I think that's one thing. I think the second thing is we're learning a lot about what what the digital divide really means. And when people talk about the digital divide, they usually are talking about people who have access to the internet and people who do not. And that's one part of the digital divide. But the other part of the digital divide, and I've said this a lot, is that you know, I'm not a person who watches a lot of television. That's something I blame my mother for, you know, that when I was younger, and I haven't been able to recover. And so, so when I came home, I didn't have like the full-fledged cable in my house. It wasn't because I couldn't afford it. It just was something that I travel a lot. It wasn't something that I had, you know, sort of spend a lot of time thinking about. But it made me think about all those people who never got broadband service at home, right? They've been accessing the internet mostly from their phone, and now we've asked them to Zoom all day or all of that. And, you know, and broadband can be expensive depending on where you are, somewhere from $50 to $80 a month. And, you know, and that might be better spent in some other places. So I think it's exposing even those kinds of things that we don't think about, right? And so people have talked about the disparities, the incidents directed toward people of Asian descent and some of those things. But I think there are these other things that we don't always see. And I, of course, mentioned the women in publishing earlier, but I also think the other thing is, I sort of alluded to this, members of our neurodiverse communities, right? And what that's like to be online for 8 or 6 or 7 hours. And I know that's hard for me. So it's hard, you know, it's hard depending on how you experience this space and then your learning capacities and abilities. And then I think the last thing is, and I've sort of said this before, you know, one of the things we're doing is experimenting with things like digital inclusion. We're creating a new toolkit. We've been looking at things like, you know, all the services that places like Amazon and Google and Zoom and Trello and everything has to offer. So we can also make our community aware of all the resources that are out there that they can utilize as well. So those are internal and external. And I say we're learning a lot. So those are great opportunities as well, right? I mean, the first time we went online to do a big program with like 800 people, I'm not going to lie, Jakiyah, I didn't know how that was going to go. None of us did.
It's like that sometimes. It's really like that sometimes.
Exactly.
I'm sure everyone will get a little bit more practice. I know the provost sent an email today explaining how classes will go in the fall. So we're going to get the hang of it. Well, I guess other people, not me. I won't be here anymore. But
oh, we'll be engaging you as an alum, Jakiyah. I'm not going to let you go that quickly.
I'll be tuning in on the participant side. No, I'd love to come back and see everything happening. And speaking of the fall, looking forward, what are some of the priorities for your work in the Office of Global Inclusion, Strategic Innovation moving forward? What are y'all working on?
Yeah, well, I would say we have a lot of initiatives. You know, some of our biggest foci are research, teaching, pedagogy, which I've sort of alluded to, right? Making sure our faculty we're doing a lot of work in inclusive teaching, global inclusive teaching, and thinking about, we have a new thing that we started on management and helping our administrators. It's called our Global Inclusive Management Institute. One of my colleagues, and we're also partnering with our offices of sustainability, student success, and student affairs. So I would say, making sure our partnerships and our partners with both internal and external, so that includes some of the things I said about corporate partnerships, and aligning those strategies in the innovation, diversity, and inclusion space. So whether that's partnering with some alum organizations, members of our alumni community, and some new partners. And then I also think, as I said, in terms of pedagogy and teaching, you know, we really want to make sure that we are serving our students in the best that we can as we diversify our classes. We want to make sure that our faculty feel like they're prepared to engage with our students in meaningful and impactful ways. And then with our students, you know, we want to also make sure that we're doing the programming, developing leadership programs. You know this, we've been working on a mentorship program, which is long overdue. We have a mentorship program for faculty and staff, but we haven't had one for students in the same way. So we started that this year, and thank you to the student leadership for all of your help in helping us reimagine these spaces. We're thinking with HR about internal mobility, community, and belonging. What does it mean? And I would say this is our #1 initiative, and we will have more work in the fall on this. And so I hope alums will tune in, because we will actually have an alumni component. And we're going to think about, what does it mean for us to be a community together? How do we build, we're a community of communities, right? And I think now is the time to really think about what that looks like when we can't gather in the same ways that we could before. So how do we create different kinds of communities? I've been fascinated by the Zoom chat rooms, the Google Hangouts, all of the ways that we're gathering now, and the Go Meets, whatever that, all of these things. So I think this is a time for us to then think about how we're communicating, developing better and more transparent tools that I think will help build trust, and then also help build leadership capacity in this area, in this era of really thinking about diversity and inclusion in the digital space. And this is the acceleration, and we know this. Everyone's asked me, people ask me this all the time, is this the normal? This isn't going to be normal. We will have we'll have a new reality. It won't be this reality. And because of the things that have been exposed to some degree by the COVID-19 pandemic, we know we need to sort of double down on these diversity and inclusion and belonging and equity efforts. And I think with the accelerated digital age, this gives us an opportunity. I was just on a panel last week on thinking about robotics and AI and gender, right? And so, yeah, exactly. And so, I think this is the time to really, in the spirit of NYU, be innovative and entrepreneurial and go out there and ask and answer some new questions.
Yes. Ooh, I love that. And then last question before we open up to the Q&A, but I'm sure everybody on this call is going to be able to participate in this. So how can alumni help NYU and help you commit to these priorities?
Yeah, thank you. Well, as I've said, we have all kinds of strategic partnerships and grant opportunities. We've applied for things that we're trying to expand and build capacity. So I think the first thing I want to say is thank you to the alums who've already supported us. And there've been so many who've done that. And, we have an alumni event in October and all of these things. So thank you. The other piece I want to say is, of course, if alums are able to give to our NYU emergency fund, of some of our students who are encountering difficulties, we've been able to provide services to them. And so please log on to NYU, and all you have to do is type into our NYU search engine, NYU Emergency Fund, and you will be able to donate some funds there. The other, of course, you can always contact our office, and that's globalinclusion@nyu.edu. If you'd like to offer or volunteer your time or expertise, we have a new program that we're starting. We work with our global inclusion officers, and those are officers that are representatives across the schools. But we have also developed what we're calling an ambassador program, which are volunteers. And those are faculty and staff and alums who want to volunteer and help out, whether that's everything from giving a lecture. As you know, some of our students really want to connect with our alums who are doing really well. And so we bring them back and have them do lectures and things like that. We have a huge program this year, and we are in the midst of our, COVID-19. We're a little behind where we should be, admittedly. But we had to convert everything to virtual and online programming. So that took a little bit. But we also started an initiative that I know you're aware of, which is called NYU Women 100, to celebrate 100 years of women's contributions, building on the ratification of the 19th Amendment. So for people who are interested in that, there's all kinds of programming. We're about to do a big outreach to about 100 alums to help us think about that for the fall and spring. And then, of course, you can always follow us on our social media outlets, etc. And then, of course, I have to mention, of course, if there's just fundraising in general, we like to friend raise before we fundraise. But if you have suggestions or things, we've had donors reach out to us for specific initiatives, and if they reach out, then we, make sure that we're in contact with alumni relations and university and development to make sure that we're working in partnership. So again, and I'll just say this, I want to say this also to you, yes, the fall might look a little different, but we know that we're still going to have classes, we're still going to offer the things that we offer at NYU, and I actually think it could be really interesting. So for those alums who have really interesting ideas about this digital space and how we build capacity, particularly to be more inclusive, send us an email and we'll get back to you and try to work with you and figure out our next steps.
Yes. As someone who's on the weird fence of like being student, also almost alumni, I can co-sign. I think it'd be really great if alumni can reach out if they want to teach a lecture or something like that. Because there's so many of you all, like they just said 600,000 of you
That's
all.
right. That's right.
That's a lot of ideas, a lot of a lot of disciplines, a lot of just knowledge. So that would be amazing to complement what might be a challenging semester for some students. And yes, again, the email address is globalinclusion@nyu.edu. So thank you, Dr. Coleman, for the wonderful discussion. I'm
Thank
just
you.
going to check and see if we have any questions in the Q&A feature. So again, you can enter your questions for Dr. Coleman in the Q&A box right at the bottom of your screen. So on my end,
I'm seeing if we have any questions. None so far.
I don't see any.
Well, I have a question for you, Jakiyah.
Oh,
Oh, I'm an HR manager. Okay. I'll come back to my question.
all right. All right.
Okay. Hello, Bradley. I'm an HR manager. How can I make my workplace more inclusive? Okay, terrific. Thanks for the question. And it's general, but that's good. That's good. So so what we try to talk about, particularly when we're thinking about management, is they're the 6 C's of inclusive leadership, and we build our models from that. Of course, you can look this up, right? Curiosity, cognizance, courage. And so when we think about that, we also marry that with a design thinking model. So I just want to talk a little bit about then what we try to do. So a lot of the ways in which people will approach diversity and inclusion work sometimes is when there's a problem. And what we try to do is approach it from an advantage and asset-based model, which means how can we leverage the talent that we have across our institution? And so just like as I was saying before about cross-generational learning, for example, right? How can we make sure, sometimes I hear when people are talking about Generation Z or the millennials before and how they're disrupting things. And I was like, that was us before. We were the disruptors before. So try to remember that. And then how do we leverage, right, the new learnings of these new generations, right? And I did make fun, but I've learned a lot about how to use my cell phone, how to use other kinds of things. And so I think in terms of making your workplace more inclusive, the question is, how do you engage and leverage those minds, those differences, those backgrounds, and then how do you train, right? And that's what we've tried to do, train managers to be more attentive to those and to actually tap people to say, okay, I've noticed actually that you might be an outlier. Let's talk about why that is and how we can bring those ideas in and what that might mean and what we might have to shift. And so I think the other thing is to know who you are as a leader, who you are as a manager, what your triggers are, what they aren't, and then how you bring that that constructive feedback into the workplace and into the management of people, and then how you leverage, as I said before, the talents of so many folks who, sometimes are just waiting to be tapped. So next question I see, what can we do to improve the experience of students at NYU who have disabilities, and can alumni help in some way? Absolutely. So let me take this one. So we're doing a lot in this space. So some of you may know, we actually this year, we're the first institution in the country to have a new position called Disability Inclusive Culture. We have been looking at this in a different kind of way, to not just through a compliance model, right, or an accommodations model, to really think about the culture of disability and what that looks like. And so this ties to something I was sort of saying earlier about design thinking. One of the other sort of methods to our approach is to think about universal design. So as we're designing things, whether that's online technologies, one of the reasons we're always ways, like thinking about closed captioning and interpretation, et cetera, is how are we serving various communities? And not seeing it as sort of additive and out there, but thinking about how that we're doing it right from the very beginning as we create new products, right? So obviously some things we have to adjust, but as we're creating new products or new initiatives, how can we make sure that we're serving all members of across, right, an ability spectrum? And how can alumni help? Alumni can help in so many ways. Alumni can help with, as I said, giving lectures. For those of you who have expertise in this area, for those of you who are developing new products, if you need testing ground, we're a great place to do that. For people who want to work with our NEST project that Christy out of our School of Steinhardt, right? There are all these projects, our Moses Center with Robin. So there's so many ways that people can contribute. And of course, if you email us, we'll let you know. And of course, there's always funding opportunities, but initially it's about time and effort. What is a book, article, or any piece of literature I'd recommend to keep learning about committing ourselves to DEI? Yes, I think the work of Dolly Chugh, I've got to plug our own faculty, Dolly Chugh out of our School of Business, and she talks a lot about the growth model, right? And she also talks about what it means to how sometimes we get tripped up because we're trying to be a good person, and sometimes what that means in terms of then how our biases then appear. So I can't underscore her work enough. It talks a lot about that asset model and about leveraging the work of Scott Page out of the University of Michigan. Really great work, and really helps, I think, move the envelope forward in thinking about diversity and inclusion as an asset, and then leveraging those talents that I was talking about before. And then the work of someone like Kenji Yoshini out of our law school, talking about things like covering and how people navigate different spaces dependent upon their background, their who they are, and how we can see that and acknowledge that in different ways. So those would be three big ones that I would suggest. Is there something I wish the alumni would have told me? What is something that you wish someone would have told you as a recent alum? Oh, yes, great question. Thank you, Leah. Yes, indeed. And I missed a question. I'll come back to that in a second. I wish that someone had told me to, take my time. I was rushing. And so I think just to take some time, actually, Jakiyah and I were talking about this earlier, and, be curious, learn as much as you can. Life is before you, and there's plenty of time to get a lot done. But I think that when I first graduated, I was so many people trying to figure out to get that job and move out, and it's particular because I was in graduate school. And so now I think I did take some time, but I don't know that it was as planned as I thought it should have been. And so to take some time to learn about who I wanted to be as a leader and what kind of career I really wanted to have. And I was fortunate enough to have some of that time. I see there's a question from an adjunct professor and an alum who currently works in the D&I space and would like to have our courses and syllabi reflect the diversity of our faculty and students to be more inclusive in the ways we teach. Yes, we have an entirely new program focused on inclusive teaching. So please reach out to us, you can send us an email and we will get you the information. It's an entirely new initiative. As I was talking about before, we actually have a new initiative also by June 1st for first session. We have a new resources related to digital inclusion as well for our faculty. So please do reach out to us for those resources. And yes, thank you, Alan, for the title. Yes, it's the person you mean to be. That's exactly right. Thank you for reminding me of that. And I also wanted to say, I missed a question up there. Yes, okay, so I'll answer this about the cultural intelligence as well. So how do I feel about the use of the cultural intelligence? So that's like a diagnostic tool. There are lots of these diagnostic tools out there. And so I say this all the time, cultural intelligence, there are diagnostic tools that even corporations have. If you look at some of the corporations like PwC or Deloitte or Catalyst or McKinsey, all of these tools can be very useful. So cultural intelligence is one of the tools, but there are lots of tools. We have partnered with a faculty organization as well, that also provides tools. We have something called, we have partnered with an organization that works with corporations called Diversity Best Practices. We also work with the conference board that has tools. So I would say avail yourself of as many tools as possible. And then as you're doing the diagnostic, because I think that's what this question is about, is then you're thinking about the diagnostic for your particular organization or unit or school. And I think that will depend on which diagnostics you want to use, right? I see here intercultural management at various French universities. And you want a tool, right, that has that global component. And there are a number of tools out there. And again, you can write to us and we'll give you some more, even more than the cultural intelligence tool. But again, right, I just want to say that you want to make sure that the tools are applicable to whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Amazing. So I think you answered all the questions in here. People can still feel free to send in questions, but I know you said you had a question for me.
I did. I do. I have a question for you. Are you nervous?
Just a little bit, but you can go ahead and ask it.
So tell us, as a soon-to-be recent alum, what's something that you're looking forward to?
Oh, okay, that's easy. I'm looking forward to the free time, because I love structure. Like I love having, classes and like doing work later, but I would love just the free time to do what I want. So like reading the books that I want and not just the ones for class. Even though I love my classes, I think I saw my dean was on here, Dean Wofford, but love Gallatin, love my classes and my courses. But, I realized I racked up this very long, like Google spreadsheet that I made of books that I just wanted to read. And because of classes and student government, I just didn't have the time to do that. So I'm gonna start that like tomorrow at noon. Is over. I like ordered another book and I think I'll be here soon. So like, I'm just excited to read and to read for pleasure, and then kind of do what you said you talked about doing right after you graduate, like taking some time to just be Jakiyah and not have to be like Jakiyah, student government chairperson or, another title. Just want to be me.
Oh, that's terrific. I'm glad to hear you're going to do that, Jakiyah. And it's, yeah, you're right. It's the time that you can take some time for yourself. And I'm glad to hear that. I see there's another question, so I'll definitely answer it. But I also wanted to say something that I didn't say before, and that is, when you asked me that question about classes, the other thing that I really learned at NYU, and it was the reason I came to NYU, and you reminded me when you were talking about Gallatin, right, is that because Gallatin is a place that brings together, right, inter and transdisciplinary learning. You get to create create what you want to do in really interesting ways. And that was one of the things that attracted me to NYU for my PhD. And it gave me the ability to critically engage in ways that I wouldn't have. And I often credit NYU with, when I said earlier, that movement through the diversity and inclusion space. I've had lots of different titles in this space. I've recreated, I was an early adapter in this field. And I think and I know that it was that learning around trans and inter and disciplinary work that allowed me to then think about systems and to think about university systems in different and unique ways and what the application would be as I moved forward. So I just wanted to say that because as you're leaving, I was reflecting for this conversation about the things that NYU provided me, and it was so very much, but that's one of the key things. And then how do I stay joyful doing the work? Well, thank you. Oh, that's my colleague, Monroe Franz. Thank you so much for that comment. For those of you who know me, I'm very, very committed to this notion of joy. And I think that, sometimes as diversity officers, we see the underbelly, right? Some of the not so great things that happen. But I also get to see the amazing things that happen, right? The amazing contributions of our students, the amazing ways that people are supporting each other, even during this COVID-19 time, right? One of my most joyful moments these days is to go out at 7 o'clock and clap for everyone, you know, and then I hear the people playing their saxophones or their French horns or their drums or whatever, right? And it's just, I just think it's amazing that we have the opportunity to do that. And for those who know, I really think of myself in the leadership, I really think of myself as a servant leader in service of others. And that really, the joy I get from that service in seeing, right, people like Jakiyah and all of our students and all of the amazing things they're doing and will do. So, so that's part of the joy. And then I also want to say, especially because the question came from one of my team members, I have the amazing opportunity to work with an amazing team. And I cannot say that enough. Jakiyah, you know that the team, you know, Leah and Monroe and Chris and Christopher and Autumn and Sean, I mean, it just goes on. And I am so fortunate that I was able to join an organization that has been so forward thinking. And people were doing so much great work before I arrived at NYU. And I'm just someone who's able to help, you know, uplift that work and push it even further out. And so that's been joyful, and continues to be so. And lastly, I'll say, and the students. I mean, you know, I think they're the best students on the globe. So
Yes.
so that's where I am. And I missed the last question. I think there was one more question up there. What do you do daily to smile, be happy, and maintain a high energy level? Well, I'm glad you do on the webinar on this conversation. You know, I really, I'm a curious person. So I'm a learner, and I say this a lot for people who were trained as professors. You know, part of what we do is profess, but part of what we do also is learn, or hopefully, right? And I think that co-learning keeps my energy up. I'm excited about new ideas. I'm excited about new possibilities. I was telling some other people last week that I participated in this hackathon with people who were between the ages of 14 and 17 years old. And one of the groups came up with basically, they were doing, they were taking pictures of moles to see if they were cancerous moles. And they developed an app on their phone, and they were all 14 to 16 years old to recognize. Exactly, Jakiyah, exactly. And I was like, okay, this is amazing. And, you know, this is just, you know, and so again, when I'm participating in those kinds of things, how can I not have a lot of energy? How can I not find that just to be amazing? And I say this, you know, for all my friends who decided not to stay in higher ed and they went off to work in other places. And now they ask me, you know, what keeps you so young? All those, I'm like, the students. They keep my energy, they keep me going. So absolutely. And it's a lot of fun, I think, for me, you know, and I'll even say this, you know, one of my favorite moments. And so you know, people ask me this about agitation and student protests or whatever. And I say, sometimes, you know, that's a good moment. It gets us to think out of the box and gives us a new kind of energy. And so I want students to feel like we're in conversation. So I don't want students to feel like they have to demand things and things like that. But when students do have things that they want to push forward on, I think that gives us an opportunity to engage in really courageous conversations, as Millie Hobson says, right, to be brave in our conversations. And so I think we have the opportunity to do that, and the students give me that opportunity all the time.
No, we try, we do our thing. No, but we do definitely do that. So I just saw another question came through that I think kind of relates to what we were just talking about. So this person's asking, do you think NYU has improved in terms of embracing and truly celebrating diversity since your student days?
Oh, yes. NYU, you know, NYU, like a lot of institutions, well, no, I wouldn't say that. Actually, I'm going to take that back. NYU is different than a lot of institutions in this way, actually. NYU has reimagined itself. And a lot of institutions, they don't reimagine themselves. They build from where they are, but it's not about a reimagining of the institution itself. And part of the reason I mentioned even the global work, NYU was global, right? We had global campuses when I was at NYU, but it wasn't the kind of global project that we have now. And wasn't the kind of, we didn't have that kind of the maker space in Brooklyn, right? And so all of those things have added to not just the diversity in terms of demography, but the diversity of how we learn and what we think. And anytime you do that, then you're also going to attract another kind of diversity, right? This demographic diversity. And then of course, if you do this global work, and then, in places like Shanghai and Sydney and Abu Dhabi and Ghana, and right, then you have a whole other level. And so, yes, I just think it's tremendous what NYU has done. And that's one of the reasons, again, not only it was one of the reasons I came here, but it's also one of the reasons I think we'll be a leader in this space, because there are very few institutions that have stepped out in this way. And then there are very few institutions that are engaging the global diversity project in the way that we are, and not in a colonial or imperial way, but really in partnership. We are in partnership with our partners in Abu Dhabi. We are in partnership with our partners in Shanghai. We're in partnership with the people in Sydney, right? And that is a very different approach than plopping down or putting a little building or sending a few people or something like that. And so Jakiyah's laughing because she knows what I'm talking about, right? And so that's very different. And that allows us, I think, to think about inclusion and diversity and equity in a global way. And when we think about this pandemic, right, we were able to learn things from Shanghai, and we're still learning from Shanghai in ways that other people, right, they say they are, but we have real partnership. We are really on the ground. We're really thinking about that. And that's very different than I think a lot of other institutions, even some corporations, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, I remember talking to Shanghai student government about like things that they were doing and like their fundraiser, and then next thing you know, same thing is happening to us.
Exactly, right. And I was teaching in Abu Dhabi in January, Jakiyah, right? And so just as Shanghai was closing to some degree, I didn't know that was going to happen, but just as it was about to close, I was teaching in Abu Dhabi, and the class I was teaching was on diversity and inclusion. And I had 2 students from Shanghai in my class, right? Yeah, so I'm just saying, like, in real time, and that, go back to that question, we were learning a lot in real time as the Abu Dhabi government was thinking about, okay, well, how are we going to manage this in terms of travel and all of that? So we've learned, we just learned so much. And I think, and that's why, again, that's why I keep saying we're a leader. And I also want to say this, because I didn't say this earlier, but the other piece that we did was this survey, this Being at NYU assessment. And for many of our soon-to-be alums, you're looking at these data and thinking, what are you doing? What are you doing? And so we did this big assessment for the people who aren't familiar with this, who are on the line, and we got 26,000 people of our community to respond. And that, when I was talking before about the themes, those themes about mentorship and mobility and student government, all those are some of the themes that came out of that assessment. But the other unintended, right, part that came out of this is we have data on 26,000 people. Most researchers, most companies, right, they are like, well, when I say this in public forums, they're like, you have what? Right, you have what? And I'm like, yeah. So even in terms of our own research, right, in this space, there are very few companies that have data on 26,000 people related to diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging. And right, and that's a huge data set that we can use in all kinds of ways to work with our alums, to work with our corporate partners, to work with our students, to work with our faculty in terms of thinking about research and teaching opportunities. So I'm just saying that in and of itself, right, is innovative, entrepreneurial. And I came in and we were doing that, and I was like, all right, here we go.
That was a project.
Yeah, and as I said, and we'll be building on that project next year. So for the alums on the line, and for people who are about to be recent alums, again, check us out. There's going to be a new initiative with some of the same colors and some of those things, and we'll be announcing that. Yeah. And we'll be looking for some help in that arena, especially because we really want to engage alums, because one of the things that we have found from that data, from those data, particularly for the people who'll be graduating, is there's some things that we can do to re-engage our alums. And that's why I talked about the ambassador program earlier and things like that. So look out for that.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I remember being in BOPES begging people to take the Being at NYU assessment. So I was glad when we met the threshold for the data to be analyzed.
Well, that's the thing, Jakiyah. So much of our community was so invested, right? And people keep asking me, you know, what, and so now I don't want to just stay talking about that same data, but we want to say this is what these data mean. This is how we can use these data, and then how do we create new programs and initiatives that we can then measure and look and see if we're addressing some of the things that so many brought up.
Exactly. No, it's important stuff.
Now, Jakiyah, one more question for you, because I can't let you go without asking this, because I want to hear this one more. So tell me a little bit about, what were some of your favorite, like, NYU moments, classes, engagements, anything?
Oh my gosh. So I think the first one that comes to mind for me, just because we had our Gallatin virtual celebration / graduation yesterday. So I was thinking about my Gallatin memories, and I was part of the Gallatin America Scholars Program, and we went to the Dominican Republic last year during my spring break, and it was so fun with one of my favorite professors, Dr. Coleman, and a group of students. We studied music and borders.
I know Kwame, we have the same last name.
Oh,
so sometimes I've gotten some mail, you know.
That's actually so funny. My two favorite Colemans, but no, Kwame's like one of my favorite professors. So it was such a fun trip. It was my first time in the DR, and it's just such a beautiful country, so much history to like just unfold, unravel, and learn. Definitely some tough moments, as most history with countries is, but it was so fun. I hope COVID, you know, clears up so I could go back. I would love to visit like soon, and that was one of my favorite moments. I also took a class with Dr. Coleman, the other one.
Yes.
But if you took a class, I probably would have taken your class as well. But trying to think of other moments. Just being in that student government office, I was telling my friends the other day, I was like, I miss that space where, like, you know, as my team was there, sometimes we would just study really late until Kimmel closed.
Yeah, I missed Kimmel, and I never thought I'd miss those elevators.
They were so slow. There were certain days they were just so slow, and I was like, all right, I'll just take the stairs. But yeah, I miss the spaces that I used to just, you know, frequent a lot. I didn't go to BOPES a lot. Most people, like, if you're my friend, you know that I do not like BOPES because of studying and everything. But yeah, I miss most of the campus, you know. I love cities.
Yeah, I miss that. We were talking to the team. I miss just, you know, walking around, talking to people, even sort of, you know, unscheduled, right? Which we can't really do now. Everything's sort of, you know, curated and scheduled. But yeah. I am glad, and I will say this. So the other thing, I know we're going to end pretty soon here, but I do want to give a big shout out and thank you to our students, our faculty, and our staff. The ways in which we have rallied during this time, shown resilience, and just, it's been amazing. Like, that's why one of the things, thank you to student government and the great work that you all have done. I was just on the phone earlier today with our provost and just talking about so many of our faculty who have done such tremendous work and risen to this occasion to make sure that our students are getting, you know, the best education possible. And then, of course, to our staff who are working all the time behind the scenes, supporting all these programs, to all the people who help, quite frankly, get us online today, the Tim, the Sean, I don't even know. I mean, I don't even know all the people, but I just want to say that because this has been no one, as one of my colleagues says, we are working remotely during a pandemic. It's not, we're just working remotely, right? Um, and so sometimes we kind of forget that, right? That it's during a pandemic. And so that adds all kinds of pressures and things. And as I alluded to before, even with our colleagues. And so thank you, because I know that, we've all had additional pressures that we've had to deal with, and to be resilient during this time. So thank you to our community, because that's the best of diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity, is when we can come together and support each other.
Yes. Shout out to Office of Global Inclusion, the whole team, NYU community, everyone who's working behind the scenes, who may not get the recognition, but is keeping NYU afloat. It's such a big team, such a big challenge, but thank you to everyone. So
yeah, I wish you the best of luck. To all those graduating tomorrow, I'm going to tune in. I will be there. I will be cheering you on. I'm going to even put on my robe, so it's official.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'm going to put on my robe. I'm going to put on my hat. I'll be sitting here just like this. No one might see me, but at least you'll know I'm there. And I know a lot of the other leadership will be there too. And we will celebrate you in person when we can. But congratulations. We're so happy and excited for all of you. And we can't wait to meet you on the alumni side.
Oh, yes. Thank you. So we're going to post this webinar online with captions in a few days on the NYU Alumni website. And of course, we invite everyone to stay connected, as we were just talking about, with the NYU Alumni Association and the Office of Global Inclusion on their websites and social media platforms, which you can see here. And we also invite you to consider making a gift to the NYU Emergency Relief Fund for students who are facing financial challenges during the COVID crisis. And you can do that at the NYU website, which is nyu.edu/giving. Again, nyu.edu/giving. So thank you for joining us. Love having a little conversation with Dr. Coleman.
Me too. It's so good to see you, Jakiyah, and I'll see you in some version tomorrow.
That's true, some version. Yes, thank you all so much.
Thank you. Take good care, everyone.
Yes, take care. Be well.
Be well, everyone.